My name is Wendy Dixon. I'm 32 years old. And 3 weeks ago, my parents stood in front of 30 people and announced that the whole family was going to Hawaii. Except me. They didn't whisper it. They didn't pull me aside afterward. They said it right there at my parents' anniversary dinner. 30 people heard my father say, "You're not going, Wendy." And 30 people watched me smile and say, "I understand." What they didn't see was what happened after midnight. Because that's when I opened an email that changed the direction of my entire life. The email was from Marcus Coleman, the gallery owner in Monterey who had spent 3 weeks trying to contact me about my photography. And the subject line said, "Your work has been selected." I stared at those 4 words for almost a full minute. Then I opened the message. Marcus wanted to represent me, not as a hobby photographer, not as someone's daughter, not as the woman who babysat Oliver and Sophie while everyone else went on vacation. As an artist. He wanted to exhibit my Invisible Women collection in his gallery.
A solo exhibition.
My hands started shaking. I read the email twice, then 3 times. And finally I whispered, "They finally see me." But I wasn't talking about my parents. I was talking about myself. For 32 years, I'd waited for my family to tell me that I mattered. That night, I realized I didn't need them to. I needed to tell myself. I closed the laptop. Then I looked at the list Megan had sent me. Sophie can't have strawberries. Oliver needs eardrops. Breakfast at 7. Lunch at noon. Nap at 1. Dinner at 6. Laundry.
Baths. Schoolwork.
Bedtime. A full week of unpaid labor. I stared at that list. Then I deleted it. Every single line. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up at my parents' house. I didn't prepare breakfast. I didn't make coffee for my father. I didn't pack anyone's lunch. I didn't drive across town. I made my own coffee. I sat by my apartment window, and I watched the sunrise. It sounds insignificant, but when you've spent years believing your time belongs to everyone else, drinking coffee in silence can feel like rebellion. At 7:14, my phone rang.
Mom.
I watched it vibrate. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then again. Then a text appeared. "Wendy, where are you?" I didn't respond. Another message. "The children are expecting you." I still didn't respond. Then my sister called. "Megan." I answered. "Hello." There was silence for 2 seconds. Then she said, "Where are you?" "At home." "What do you mean?" "I'm at home, Megan." She laughed nervously. "Wendy, don't be ridiculous. We're leaving for the airport in 2 hours. I know. So, I'm not coming." Another silence. "What?" "I'm not babysitting the kids." Her voice changed. "Mom said you agreed." "I didn't." "You didn't say no." I looked out the window. Because nobody asked me. Megan became quiet. Then she said the sentence that told me everything. "But that's what you do." I closed my eyes. There it was. Not love. Not family. A job description. "Not anymore," I said. And hung up. 20 minutes later, my mother was at my apartment. She didn't knock gently. She pounded. "Wendy." I opened the door. She walked inside without waiting. "What is wrong with you?" "Nothing." "Your sister is panicking." "She'll survive." My mother's face hardened. "Your father is furious." I nodded. "I'm sure he is." "Do you understand what you've done?" I almost laughed.
No, Mom.
"What have I done?" "You've ruined the family trip."
No.
I looked directly at her. "You made a family trip that didn't include me." She stared at me. For once, she didn't have an immediate answer. Then she said, "You've always been difficult." That sentence hurt less than it used to. Maybe because I finally understood what it meant. Difficult was what they called me whenever I wanted something. Difficult was what they called me when I said no. Difficult was what they called me when I stopped accepting disrespect. I stepped aside. "You should go." She didn't move. "Wendy, family makes sacrifices." I smiled. "I know." She looked confused. "I've been making them for 32 years. Then I closed the door. That afternoon, I called Aunt Ruth. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you finally did it." I smiled. Did what? Stopped apologizing. I laughed. Then I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet. Then she said, "Good. Good.
Yes.
Good. But they're angry. They're supposed to be." Mom said I've ruined everything. Ruth sighed. Wendy, listen carefully. Her voice became serious. People who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries selfish. I wrote that sentence down because I knew I would need it. Then Ruth asked, "Did you answer Marcus?" "Not yet." "Why?"
I'm scared.
"Of what?" "That it's not real." She laughed softly. "Sweetheart, that's exactly why you have to go." That night, I called Marcus Coleman. He answered immediately. "Wendy." "I was hoping you'd call." I took a breath. "I read your email." And I looked around my small apartment, at the old camera sitting on my desk, at the photographs covering my wall, at 3 years of work nobody in my family had ever bothered to ask about. "I'll do it." Marcus smiled through the phone. "Good." Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "We're not just going to exhibit your photographs." "What do you mean?" "I want to build the exhibition around your story." My heart stopped. My story. Yes. The invisible people. The people who get overlooked. The people who are present but treated like they're not. I swallowed. That's what my work is about. I know.
He paused.
That's why it matters. I didn't sleep much that night, because for the first time, I wasn't planning how to become useful to my family. I was planning how to become myself. And I had no idea that my parents were about to discover exactly what I'd been hiding. 3 days later, my parents came back from Hawaii. I didn't go to the airport. I didn't call. I didn't ask how the trip went. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. But my mother wasn't finished with me. Saturday morning, she showed up again. This time my father was with her. Harold stood behind Patricia with his arms crossed. He looked angry, not disappointed, angry. "Wendy," he said, "come outside." I stayed inside. "Why?" "We need to talk." "We can talk here." He looked at my mother. She whispered something. Then he said, "You embarrassed us." I almost smiled.
How?
"Your sister had to cancel activities because you refused to help. She had to take care of her own children." His face darkened. "You know that's not what I mean."
I did.
They didn't want a daughter. They wanted an available daughter. There was a difference. My mother stepped forward. "You've changed." "Yes." "You're cold."
No.
I looked at her. "I'm just not available anymore." She stared at me. Then she noticed the camera on my desk. "What is that?" "My camera." "You still do that photography thing?" "Yes." My father laughed. "The hobby?" I didn't answer. Mom picked up one of the photographs from my desk. It showed an elderly man sitting alone at a bus stop in Boston. His hands were folded. His coat was worn. His face looked tired. My mother looked at it for 3 seconds, then put it down. "People aren't interested in pictures like this." I looked at her. "Maybe not people like you." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you only notice people when they make you look good." Silence. My father stepped forward. "Enough." For the first time, I didn't lower my eyes.
No. He stopped.
I continued. "You've spent my entire life telling me to be grateful." Grateful for what? The food I cooked, the children I watched, the parties I organized, the errands I ran. My voice shook, but none of that made me family. My father said, "We gave you a home." I looked at him, and you reminded me every day that it wasn't really mine. My mother started crying.
But I knew that cry.
I'd seen it before. It was the cry she used whenever she was losing control of a situation. She said, "We're your parents." I nodded. "And I'm your daughter." "Exactly."
No.
I took a breath. "I'm your daughter when you need something." She looked away. I continued. "I'm your daughter when Megan needs a babysitter. When you need someone to cook. When Derek needs his taxes done. When you need someone to organize Thanksgiving. But when there's a vacation," I shook my head. "Suddenly, I'm not family.
My father said nothing.
Then my mother asked the question that changed everything. Where are you going? I looked at her. California. Her face changed. Why? I picked up my camera. Because I'm having an exhibition. She stared at me. What exhibition?
A solo photography exhibition.
My father laughed. You're joking.
No.
Who would pay to see those pictures? People who understand them. My mother went pale. Who invited you? Marcus Coleman. My father's expression changed.
He knew the name.
Maybe he'd heard it somewhere, but he didn't understand what it meant. My mother did. Coastal Light Gallery? I nodded. She stared at me. You've been keeping this from us. I smiled sadly. You never ask. That sentence landed harder than anything else. My mother looked at my photographs again. Then she asked, how much are they worth? And suddenly I understood. Even now, even here, she wasn't asking what they meant. She was asking what they were worth. I said, I don't know yet. My father scoffed. You've lost your mind. Maybe. But for the first time, I was losing it for myself. They left. That evening, Aunt Ruth called. How did it go? They know. About the exhibition? Yes. What did they say? I laughed. Mom asked how much the photographs are worth. Ruth was silent. Then she said, of course she did. A week later, I flew to California. The first time I stepped into Coastal Light Gallery, I almost turned around. The walls were white. The ceilings were high. Natural light poured through huge windows. And on the main wall was a temporary sign. Invisible Women. Wendy Dixon. My name. My real name. On a gallery wall. I touched the letters. Marcus walked over. You made it. I nodded. I'm scared. Good. Good. Fear means this matters. Over the next 2 days, we installed the photographs. One by one. An elderly woman washing dishes alone. A nurse sleeping in her car between shifts. A mother eating the leftovers after feeding her children. A janitor standing outside an office building at midnight. A young woman sitting at a family dinner table while everyone spoke around her. That last photograph was the one I almost didn't display. Marcus noticed. Why not? Because it's too personal. He studied it. Is that you? I nodded. He didn't ask anything else. On opening night, the gallery filled. I stood near the back. People walked from photograph to photograph. Some whispered. Some cried. One woman stood in front of the photograph of the family dinner for almost 5 minutes. Then she turned to me. Did you take these? Yes. She smiled through tears. Thank you. For what? For making me feel visible. I didn't know what to say. Then Marcus walked up. Wendy, there's someone here who wants to meet you. I turned and froze. Aunt Ruth. She had flown from California's other side of the state just to be there. She hugged me. You did it. I cried. I did. No. She pulled back and looked at me. You finally did it. Later that evening, Marcus made an announcement. He told a room that the Invisible Women collection had been purchased for a major permanent display. The amount was far beyond anything I'd ever imagined. But the money wasn't what made my knees weak. It was hearing strangers applaud my work. Not because I was someone's daughter. Not because I had helped them. Not because I was useful. Because I had created something. For myself. That night I checked my phone. 23 missed calls. All from my mother. Then a message. We need to talk. Your father found out about the money. I stared at the screen. There it was. The moment I had been expecting. They hadn't called because they missed me. They hadn't called because they were proud. They called because they had discovered that the invisible daughter wasn't invisible anymore. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned my phone face down and went back into the gallery. Because the next morning, something even bigger was waiting for me. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my father. We are still your family. I read it. Then another. You need to remember where you came from. And finally, don't let strangers turn you against us. I stared at those words. Strangers. Marcus. The gallery. The people who had believed in my work. They were strangers. But my own parents had known me for 32 years.
And still didn't know me.
I called Aunt Ruth. Should I answer them? She said, do you want to?
No.
Then don't. But they're my parents. Wendy, being someone's daughter doesn't mean you owe them unlimited access to your life.
He said quietly.
Then I said, I think I'm ready to tell them everything. Everything. Yes. That afternoon, I drove back to Boston. Not because I was going back to them, because I wanted to finish something. I asked my parents to meet me at Aunt Ruth's old friend's restaurant. They arrived together. Megan and Derek came too. Of course they did. The moment my mother saw me, she said, why didn't you tell us about the exhibition? I looked at her. Because you never asked. We're your family. I smiled. Then why did I have to leave home to become myself? Nobody answered. Megan finally spoke. Wendy, we're happy for you. I looked at her. Are you? Of course. Then why did you tell Mom that my success was just luck? Her face changed. She looked at Mom. Mom looked at Dad. I continued. I know about the messages. Megan's eyes widened. My mother whispered,
How?
I have screenshots. Silence. Megan looked down. Then she said, I was angry. You said I thought I was better than everyone. I didn't mean it. You said the gallery was a joke. I was jealous. That was the first honest thing she'd said. I nodded. Thank you. She looked surprised. For what? For finally telling the truth. My father leaned forward. Enough of this. I looked at him.
No, Dad. He stopped.
I spent 32 years being enough for everyone else. My voice was calm. I'm done. I reached into my bag. Not for money. Not for revenge. For a photograph. I placed it on the table. It was the photograph of the woman sitting alone at the family dinner. My mother stared at it. Then her expression changed. Because she recognized the woman. It was me. She looked at the photograph again. You took this? Yes. When? Thanksgiving last year. She shook her head. I don't understand. I was sitting at the table. You were serving everyone. Exactly. I looked around the table. And nobody noticed that I wasn't eating. Megan's eyes filled with tears. Derek looked uncomfortable. My father stared at the photograph. For the first time, he looked at me differently. Not as an employee. Not as a burden. As a person. I said, that's what Invisible Women is about. People who are present but never truly seen. My mother whispered, Wendy. I stopped her. I don't hate you. She looked up. I don't even want revenge. My father swallowed. Then what do you want? I answered honestly. I want my life back. Nobody spoke. I want to wake up without wondering what everyone needs from me. I want to travel. I want to take photographs. I want to eat dinner without getting up every 5 minutes. I want to say no without being punished. And I want people around me who don't need me to disappear, so they can feel important. My mother began crying. This time I didn't try to comfort her, because that wasn't cruelty. It was a boundary. She asked, Are you leaving us? I thought about the question.
No.
I looked at her. I'm leaving the role you gave me. She cried harder. Megan whispered, Can we fix this? I looked at her. Maybe. But it won't happen because I become useful again. She nodded. It happens because you learn to see me. My father remained silent for a long time. Then he said something I never expected. I'm proud of you. The old Wendy would have cried immediately. The old Wendy would have forgiven everything in one sentence. But I wasn't the old Wendy anymore. I smiled. Thank you. And that was all.
No dramatic revenge. No screaming.
No cutting everyone out forever. Just the truth. 3 months later, Invisible Women opened permanently at the gallery. Marcus offered me a contract for a second collection. Aunt Ruth came to the opening. Megan came too.
Alone. No Derek.
No kids. She stood in front of one photograph for several minutes. Then she turned to me. I never realized. I nodded. Neither did I. She smiled sadly. I miss you. I miss you too. We hugged. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because something had finally changed. My parents didn't come that night. And strangely, I was okay with that. 6 months later, I moved to Monterey. I rented a small apartment near the water. Nothing luxurious. Nothing impressive. Just mine. I kept taking photographs. People who worked overnight. Women raising children alone. Immigrants building new lives. Older people sitting quietly in places nobody noticed. Invisible people. But there was one photograph I never took again, a woman sitting at a family dinner, waiting to be seen. Because I wasn't that woman anymore. One Sunday morning, I received a package. Inside was my old kitchen apron. The one that said, "World's Best Aunt." There was a note from Megan. "Wendy, I found this in Mom's closet. I think you should have it." I smiled. I didn't throw it away. I didn't wear it either. I hung it in my studio. Not as a reminder of what they expected me to be, as a reminder of what I had survived. Then my phone rang.
Mom.
I answered.
E.
There was a long pause. Then she said, "How are you?" I smiled. "I'm good." "Really? Really?" She took a breath. "Your father wants to come see your gallery." I looked around my studio, at my photographs, at my name on the wall. "He's welcome." Another pause. Then Mom said, "Wendy." "Yeah, I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. For years, I had dreamed of hearing those words. When they finally came, I realized I didn't need them anymore. But I accepted them anyway. "Thank you, Mom." We talked for another 10 minutes. Nothing was completely fixed. Maybe it never would be. But something was different. There were no demands.
No fathers. No babysitting. No errands.
Just a mother asking her daughter how she was doing. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. A year after that anniversary dinner, I stood outside my gallery watching the sun disappear over the water. A young woman walked up to me. She had seen my exhibition. She said, "I feel invisible in my own family." I knew exactly what she meant. I told her something Aunt Ruth once told me. People who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries selfish. She nodded, then asked, "But what if they get angry?" I smiled. "Let them. Isn't family supposed to matter?" "Yes." I looked back at the gallery. "But family isn't supposed to require you to disappear." She smiled, then walked away. I stood there alone, but I didn't feel lonely. Because 3 years earlier, I thought being invisible was my identity. I thought being useful was the closest thing I'd ever get to being loved. I thought saying yes was the price of belonging. I was wrong. My parents didn't lose me when I stopped babysitting. They didn't lose me when I refused to stay behind for Hawaii. They didn't lose me when I moved to California. They lost the version of me who would sacrifice herself just to keep everyone else comfortable. And maybe that version of me needed to disappear. Because the woman standing in front of that gallery wasn't invisible anymore. She was Wendy Dixon, photographer, artist, daughter, and, most importantly, she was finally her own person. I used to believe family was the people who expected the most from you. Now I know better. Family isn't the person who asks how much you can sacrifice. Family is the person who notices when you're tired. The person who celebrates your dreams even when they don't benefit from them. The person who doesn't make you earn your place at the table. And sometimes, loving your family means walking away from the role they created for you. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally learned to love yourself. My parents wanted me to stay behind in Boston so everyone else could enjoy Hawaii. They thought they were leaving Wendy behind. They were wrong. I wasn't left behind. I was finally moving forward. And that was the greatest vacation I ever took. Not to Hawaii, but into my own life.